Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Marianne Vega Clancy, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego. I'm joined this evening by Mandy Butler, chair of the Pros and Cons Committee, Rosette Garcia, co-chair of our Voter Services Committee, and they will be presenting this evening. Jen Kerwin, co-chair of Voter Services, is our Zoom host this evening. And we're here tonight to discuss Proposition 50. In addition to telling you about the pros and cons of Prop 50, what it will do if it passes, how much money has been raised to support or oppose it, Rosette and Mandy will also provide some background and context about redistricting to help you understand the issue. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit any questions that you have during the presentation by using the Q&A button, which you should be able to find at the bottom of your screen. Before we dive in, I'd like to spend a moment telling you about League because it is relevant to how we will approach our topic tonight. The mission of the League is to encourage informed and active participation in government and increase understanding of major public policy issues. For example, we organize and moderate candidate forums. We register voters, and we provide informational talks about issues on the ballot, which is what we will be doing today. We are proudly nonpartisan, which we have been for the 105 years of our existence. That means that we neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties at any level of government. But we do work on issues of concern to our members and to the public. This decision made back in 1920 to stay nonpartisan still guides everything that we do. It's what allows the League's voice to rise above the noise of party politics and focus on what really matters, helping voters feel informed, confident, and ready to make their own choices when they cast their vote. That's the heart of our voter service work, and that's why we're here tonight. So now I will turn things over to Mandy for some background information about Prop 50.
So as Marianne mentioned, we often do these informational talks about propositions, but typically we give them in general election years. So why are we here tonight? As you know, a special election has been called by the governor and our legislature to vote on a proposed amendment to our Constitution. This proposal has been placed on the ballot as Proposition 50. And in keeping with our mission of informing voters about what's on the ballot, we'll be explaining Prop 50 in some detail. We'll actually be explaining it a little more detail than we usually might for a proposition. And I think one of the reasons for that is because besides being so important to Californians, the results of this proposition are also very important to the nation. The proposition title is Authorizes Temporary Changes to Congressional District Maps in Response to Texas's Partisan Redistricting. And the question the proposition asks voters is, should the state authorize temporary changes to congressional district maps in response to Texas's partisan redistricting? And as Marianne mentioned also, we are going to be talking about the arguments pro and con to the proposition. And I need to give a short disclaimer before we start. The statements we're going to show you come from supporters and opponents as published in the official voter information guide. The League cannot vouch for their accuracy, and the statements don't represent the League's viewpoint. They reflect the supporters and opponents' opinions and may not always be based on facts. I'm going to turn it over to Rosette now to start talking about congressional districts and the redistricting process. Rosette?
Thank you, Mandy, and good evening, everybody. And again, thank you for being here tonight. Starting with a little bit of background, let's talk about what are congressional districts. They are the parts of a state where people in that district elect a member to represent them in the U.S. House of Representatives. What do? Well, representatives help develop the federal budget. They establish U.S. policy priorities, and they work with other representatives to make new laws. Each representative is elected to serve a 2-year term. How many congressional districts are there in the United States? There are 435. California has 52 of those districts. Currently, of those 435 districts, 219 are represented by Republicans, 213 by Democrats, and 3 are vacant. In California, which has, as I said, 52 districts, 9 are currently represented by Republicans, and 43 are represented by Democrats. Want to remind you that we also have senators that serve, and there are 2 from each state, and they are elected statewide, and they serve 6-year terms. So, who draws congressional district maps in California? Well, prior to 2008, our legislature drew the lines. In 2008, Prop 11 was approved by the voters and established a nonpartisan commission to draw the maps for state senate, state assembly, and the Board of Equalization. Did not include congressional districts. But in 2010, Prop 20 was put on the ballot and approved by the voters. And this proposition transferred the authority of drawing congressional district maps from the legislature to the independent commission that was established in 2008. So this commission that was established is the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, and it was actually an amendment that was made to our Constitution in Article 21. And the commission that constitutional amendment lays out a lot of the rules around redistricting, including the fact that the commission is a 14-member commission and must be made up of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 4 members of the commission who are not affiliated with either party. There are actually no party preference members of the commission. And then the district lines must be drawn in conformity with strict non-partisan rules. The commission is not allowed to draw districts that favor a candidate or a political party. They can't take that into account when they're drawing lines. They must take in public input from communities around the state, and the communities tell the commission about their communities and why they should stay together in one district so that their voices can be heard. And these commissioners are selected in a pretty well thought out process that is meant to produce a commission that is independent from legislative influence and is also reasonably representative of the state's diversity. In other words, the commission should look a lot like the California electorate. Has conducted congressional redistricting twice, so once in 2011 and another time in 2021, most recently in 2021. So when are the lines redrawn? They are redrawn every 10 years after the U.S. Census is completed. And the new congressional district lines are drawn to reflect their allotted number of representatives and to rebalance the numbers of people in each district so that districts have roughly equivalent population. And that's the process called redistricting. And as you can imagine, in 10 years, the population in districts might change because people die, people are born, people move out of a district into another district, whole new developments might appear in a district. And so you could have a situation where one district grows in population by a great amount, and another district maybe loses population. And so the redistricting process is a method by which that those elections are rebalanced so each district has roughly equivalent numbers in them. Each state decides what process to use to draw its district maps. But when drawing new maps, each state must follow federal laws. For example, each district in the state must represent about the same number of people. I said that already. And the U.S. Supreme Court in 2019 ruled that the Constitution does not prohibit partisan gerrymandering to increase a political party's clout. Only gerrymandering that is explicitly takes race into account is not allowed. So how do other states draw their maps? In most states, the state legislatures draw congressional district maps, just like we did in California before 2008, sometimes with the help, sometimes without the help of advisory committees. Some states, and they're listed there, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, and so forth, draw both state and federal districts using an independent commission with regulations limiting the participation by elected officials. Members of these commissions typically are not legislators or elected officials, and each state other than Colorado and New York also ban commissioners from running for office in the districts they draw. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mandy.
So to return to the question at hand, because of developments happening in other states, our legislature and governor have passed legislation to enact new district lines, so new congressional maps. In order to do this, they had to have a 2/3 approval in both our state Senate and Assembly. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see how those votes are shown. So in the Senate, there were 30 yeas and 80 nays, and in the Assembly, 47 to 20. So again, they had a 2/3 majority. They were able to pass this as a bill. This legislation, however, requires voter approval because it will change the state constitution. But note that approval of the proposition only requires a 50% plus one of voters to pass the proposition. So the next question is, why did this proposition, why was it put on the ballot? As mentioned before, Republicans hold a slim lead in the House, 219 Republican representatives versus 213 Democrats. And in order to ensure that Republicans maintain that majority after the 2026 election, in the summer of 2025, President Trump asked Texas state legislators to redraw their congressional maps to improve the Republicans' ability to win 5 districts now held by Democrats in Texas. In August 2025, the Texas state legislature passed a bill to adopt these new maps for the 2026 election. So in California, in response to that, the members of the legislature and Governor Newsom had new maps drawn in California. And on August 18th, 2025, these maps, as I mentioned, were approved by the Senate and the legislature. And this was known as Assembly Bill 604. Again, but these maps can't go into effect without voter approval via Prop 50 in this special election. So I just want to mention too that in regard to this redistricting, although states must by law redistrict every 10 years after each census, there's no legal impediment to a state redrawing districts in the middle of the decade. It is, however, very unusual, and typically states redraw lines in mid-decade only when a court orders it to do so because they've somehow violated election laws. Several other states are considering mid-decade redistricting, and in fact, in Missouri, the legislature and the governor have already approved a new map that will probably give Republicans an extra seat in Missouri. Now, so let's talk about what Proposition 50 would do if it is approved. So first of all, it will change the California Constitution, allowing the maps drawn by the California Citizens Redistricting Commission to be replaced with the new maps approved by the legislature via law AB 604. The new maps would be used in any congressional election through 2030. So that means 2026, 2028, and 2030. After the 2030 census, authority for drawing the maps would return to the CCRC Commission as set out by the law in our state constitution. Prop 50 also includes language supporting the use of fair, nonpartisan redistricting commissions nationwide. Note that all the other districts drawn by the CCRC for state senate, assembly, etc., will not be affected and will remain the same. So what effect, and if Prop 50 is approved, what effect would it have on the number of Democratic versus Republican representatives in the House from California? So it would change the percentage of registered Republicans, Democrats in many districts. And we'll look at some of those maps later. But the effect would be such that Democrats would have an advantage in 5 districts currently represented by Republicans. It also would make more Democrats would be pulled into 5 swing districts currently represented by Democrats. So for example, District 49 is now represented by Mike Levin, a Democrat. But the new map would give him a slightly larger percentage of registered Democrats in the district, so his seat would be safer. Again, it's same thing for Dave Min, Derek Tran, and Orange County. So in summary, 5 districts would go from a majority of Republican voters to a majority of Democratic voters, and 5 which have Democratic reps right now would get a slightly larger number of registered Democrats. And again, we'll look at some of those maps in a few minutes. Right now, I'm going to turn it back over to Rosette.
Thank you, Mandy. We always cover the fiscal effects of a proposition, and that's what I'm going to do now. So if Prop 50 passes, there would be one-time costs to counties of up to a few $1,000,000 to update election materials to reflect the new congressional district maps. There would be one-time costs to the state of about $200,000. And these numbers are just the cost of implementing the new maps at the county level and at the state level. It doesn't actually include the cost of having this election. There are some estimates that put the cost of this special election at over $200 million. So now I'm going to tell you what supporters say, and you can see on the left-hand side of the slide some of the prominent supporters of Prop 50. But what they say is that this proposition is a temporary emergency plan needed to stop President Trump's attempt to unfairly rig the 2026 election. They say that it gives voters the ability to approve the district lines in this election, which is true. We're voting on it in Prop 50. They also say that it creates fair maps that reflect California's diverse communities and that it protects us from partisan gerrymandering. It keeps California a leader in fair elections by preserving its independent redistricting system. And finally, they say that it strengthens democracy by making sure Republicans don't have an unfair advantage in Congress. So here is a slide that shows you who the opponents are, some of the prominent voices. You'll see them on the left. And here's what they say. They say that Prop 50 is a power grab by politicians undoing fair election reforms and returning to gerrymandered districts that benefit politicians over voters. They say it replaces an open public process with secretive political backroom deals. They say it hurts fair representation by dividing neighborhoods and weakening minority voices, and that it lets politicians control district lines for years and could open the door to permanent control. And then they point out that the cost to taxpayers of $200 million is high when the state is cutting funding to important programs because of budget problems. And so we always like to follow the money. We think that's an important piece of information. So here is a slide showing how much money has been raised in support of Prop 50 and to oppose Prop 50. The yes total is currently a little over $127 million. And you can see we only list the top 5 entities in either category. So we've listed 5 on the left. And what I'd like to mention here is that there are 500 times more donors on the yes side than on the no side. So it was easy for us to identify 5 top donors in support of Prop 50. On the no side, they raised just a little under $80 million, and you can see who those top donors are. And what is being said and what I believe is true is that this is one of the most expensive ballot propositions. The yes side has a diverse group of unions, political action committees, private donors contributing to its efforts. And the no side has been funded almost entirely by Charles Munger Jr., who was instrumental in funding both previous propositions on redistricting, Prop 11 and Prop 20. So I'm turning it back to Mandy to have us take a look at some of the maps. This is really interesting.
So we're now going to look in detail at some of the maps. The maps as they are now and what they will look like if Prop 50 is approved. So most districts have experienced some change in their district lines in the proposed new maps. But not all have changed much in the terms of the representation of parties in their district. You can see here, if on the left shows the distribution, the maps as they are now, and what they will be if this proposition is approved. And again, this is a little hard to look at. This is from Ballotpedia. If you want to, you can go there and look at this in more detail. But you can see that the northern part of the state, red represents districts that have a majority of Republican voters, and blue represents districts that have a majority of Democratic voters. Northern California in particular is affected by these maps in terms of switching that the percentages. But let's look at some of our local maps, our local districts, because I think those really illustrate a couple of things about the proposition. So on the right, in purple, shows the current map of the 48th district, which is represented by Darrell Issa. And you can see that in purple, this area includes a lot of the East County and so on. The gold line actually represents what the boundaries of the new map would be if Prop 50 is approved, what the new District 49 would look like. And you can see what this map has done is it's pulled in some of the Coachella Valley area. And if this map goes into effect, if Prop 50 is approved, we can see how this would change the distribution of Republican versus Democratic voters. On the right, in purple will represent Democratic voters, gold Republican. Right now, in the 48th district, as it is now, 28% of the voters are Democrats, 42 are Republicans, and the rest are no party or some other party. If the new map goes into effect, that will really switch the distribution. And in fact, the number of Democratic voters in that new district would increase to 36%, and the number of Republican voters would drop to 32%. So this is a district that's currently represented by a Republican, and if the new map goes into effect, it would now most likely go to a Democratic representative. And a lot of that is due to the fact that they pulled in voters from the Coachella Valley. So now let's look at another district, a local district, which is, sorry, I went too fast. The 49th district, which is currently represented by Mike Levin. This is an example of a district where there is now a Democratic representative, but if the new map goes into effect, that district, Mike Levin, the representative in the 49th, would have a slightly increased number of Democratic voters pulled into his district. Again, the purple represents the district as it is now. The gold represents the new boundaries if Prop 50 is approved. And you can see that the new district will pull in more of La Jolla and in particular UCSD. So right now, the distribution of voters in the district is about 35% registered Democrats, 35% registered Republicans. Now, even with that, Mike Levin won the district with 52.2% of the vote, even with this 35-35 split. But to make his district even safer, the new map would increase the number of Democratic voters to 36% and drop the number of registered Republican voters to 32%. So this is an example of the new maps making a Democratic district even safer for a Democratic representative. Now, the question is, okay, how does this occur? These two districts we've just seen, they're pulling in more Democratic voters. So how are these maps, how is this happening? Well, if we look at the 50th district, which is represented by Scott Peters, a Democrat, the purple again is his district as it is now. And if we look at the number, he has a big advantage in terms of Democratic voters. There are 42% of the voters in his district are registered Democrats, 26 are registered Republicans. But with the new district map, because he would give up some of La Jolla and UCSD, the number of registered Democrats in his district drops to 39%, and he picks up more of East County, so the number of registered Republicans would increase to 29%. However, he would still have a 10% advantage in terms of the numbers of registered Democrats. So hopefully those three examples give you an idea of how these maps would change the distribution of Democratic versus Republican representatives in our state. So to summarize, a yes vote on Prop 50 supports amending the California Constitution to allow the state to use a new congressional maps for the elections in 2026 through to 2030. A no vote opposes this constitutional amendment, and it supports keeping the existing congressional maps in place for use in the upcoming elections. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rosette to close out and give you a little more information about the voting dates.
Thanks, Mandy. So this slide just has a list of important dates between now and November 4th, which is the last day to vote. We like to say in California, we use the Secretary of State's language about voting. There are more days and more ways to vote in California. You don't have to wait till Election Day. Many of you have probably already received your ballot in the mail. They started being mailed on October 6th. And so you can already, after you get off this call, you can fill out your ballot. Maybe you have the information that you need. And you can pop it in the mail, drop it at an official ballot drop box. Or you can go vote in person beginning on October 21st when some of the vote centers will be open. I'm sorry, October 25th. And then through November 4th, which is the last day to vote. Yeah, thanks, Mandy, I just wanted to mention real quickly.
Or should I go back?
It's all right. I should have mentioned it. The voter registration deadline, if you're not registered to vote, or you need to re-register for any reason, it's October 20th. Although you can always register and vote in person on the same day at any vote center or at the Registrar of Voters, basically once the vote centers are open. So these are three trusted nonpartisan resources that you can refer to if you needed more information. One is the Secretary of State, sos.ca.gov. We draw a lot of the information that we use in our pros and cons from them. Our own Easy Voter Guide has been published, but you can also find it online, easyvoterguide.org. And then Vote 411 is the League of Women Voters national online ballot tool, and we are posting information about Prop 50 there. But you can find election information during any election at Vote 411. And then finally, I'd like to just thank you for being here tonight and to remind you that we are an all-member, all-volunteer organization. And we encourage you, if you're not already a member, to become a member. We're open to anyone, male or female, who would like to help support us in our work and whose values align with ours. And if not, please consider making a donation. We can't do this work without the support of our members and community members like you. So with that, I don't know if we've gotten any questions tonight, but if you haven't yet, you can put them in the Q&A, and I'll turn it back over to Marianne or Mandy.
I do not see any questions. I don't know. It looks like we don't have any questions. So hopefully, I guess we answered people's questions.
Okay. Marianne, any?
No, I just want to thank everyone for being here, and please fill out your ballots and get them in the mail. And feel free to reach out to us if you do come up with some questions after this webinar is concluded. Thank you for being here tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Rosette. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.